Illegally Deaf is a podcast about overcoming obstacles. I'm Danny Burnside, and just this year, I was diagnosed with severe hearing loss. Oh, did I mention I'm a professional Hollywood voice actor? Funny how that goes. I've made the decision to own my disability and interview remarkable guests who are thriving in light of being disabled. Welcome to the Illegally Deaf podcast. Alberto, how you doing, sir?
Give me a second. Get off my desk. Go on.
Who is on your desk?
My cat.
Let's hear about the cat a little bit. What's the cat's name?
His name is Foss. Fat, orange. You can probably figure it out.
Hilarious. You got an acronym for your cat's name. I love it, dude.
Yes. He's basically me in animal form.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that.
He eats a lot. When he wants attention, he'll jump on me, and it doesn't matter what time it is. When he's hungry, he's hungry. We always had dogs. I've never really liked dogs. It has nothing to do with the dogs per se. I've just never really liked dogs.
Well, you know, it's funny. Even though I do love interacting with dogs, if I had to say whether I myself am more of a cat or a dog, I don't mean a cat person or dog person. I mean me, myself, my personality, my core, my essence. Oh, Alberto, I'm a cat.
I could see that.
When I plug in hard. And when I plug out hard.
Yep. I very recently moved out when my ex-wife and I separated and then divorced. I kept the cat and she kept the dog. The interesting thing was the dog would follow me around.
Too funny. Well, without knowing the relationship at all, I bet your ex-wife hates that the dog likes you better. Let's be real about that.
She did. And I never understood that because I would tell her, you know, it's not really my fault. As much as I try to push the dog away, he just would not go.
The first text exchange that we had just on Messenger, I instantly knew that you were a highly intelligent person, and that just comes through. And then when you told me that you're a property manager who's also blind, honestly, man, it's a super, super impressive thing, and I just applaud you.
Thank you. I'm still trying to figure out, since I've been doing this for so long, for like 4 years now, and I hear people tell me like, oh yeah, it's an impressive job. And I'm like, I don't know. I've been doing it for so long that it kind of comes as second nature for me.
All right, well, let's jump into it. Guys, my guest today was born in Cuernavaca, Mexico, a.k.a. the city of eternal spring. God, that sounds gorgeous. He came to the U.S. when he was just 1 or 2 years old, moving into a pretty rough neighborhood that was riddled with gang violence. When he was 14, he went off to a school for the blind and deaf. As I mentioned, my guest today is blind, which was set up a little like a boarding school. And unfortunately there, he experienced bullying at the hands of his blind peers. In 2008, he discovered he also has a mild case of cerebral palsy, and in that same year, he tragically lost his best friend. Due to being blind, he was told as a kid that he would not be able to do certain things. He has always strived to prove that notion wrong, something I really love about him. He is now a successful property manager and an independent radio host. It's my pleasure to welcome the intelligent and empathetic Alberto Carreto, a.k.a. Beto.
Oh, thank you. This is kind of a first for me.
Were you born completely blind, or did you have any percentage of your vision at birth?
I was born totally blind. I have a condition called microphthalmia, which to me translates to very small eyes. It's a very rare condition. I have only met 2 other people that have the same condition.
Is it hereditary?
I'm the first in my family that has it. I have another blind nephew, but he was born with something else like bilateral thalmia or something like that. And he wears prosthetics. Luckily for me, I don't wear glasses because I still have my eyes. I tend to keep my eyes closed all the time, so people will ask me, like, is he sleeping? It makes me look like I'm unaware.
Right.
And so I use that to my advantage.
Alberto was in a position recently where he needed to replace his seeing cane or his walking cane. Well, he brought up to me the difficulties in replacing what should be such a simple item to replace. He and I were talking about how I had recently visited Costco to check out their hearing aid department. And he said, you know, what's so funny, Danny? As a blind person, I can't just walk into Costco and buy a seeing cane or a walking cane. And honestly, Alberto, it took me a minute to even register what I was hearing or reading. He's right, guys. You can walk into Costco and you can buy eyeglasses, prescription eyeglasses. You can walk into Costco and you can buy hearing aids. You cannot walk into Costco and pick up a walking cane. That's such a wild distinction, and it really opened my eyes to the difficulties that you must go through to get such a simple item.
No kidding. I mean, the cane that I ended up getting, I'm not plugging him here, but it's from a guy. He calls himself Sedona Dave. He has a company called A Werewolf Gear. The cane was more than $100,
Jeez.
which to me it's like I get why, but the fact that I had to go online and buy this cane because I even went to the blindness centers that are supposed to carry the canes, and one of them told me, we haven't carried canes in 5 years.
Why?
That was my question too. I said, why not? You would
Right.
think that a cane would be an essential thing, that you would want to carry it. I mean, you can buy them on Amazon, but I don't trust something that important. I don't trust getting it on Amazon. One of my family members said to me, "Hey, why did you spend $100 on your cane? There's canes on Amazon that are like $20." And I said, "Oh, really? What are they made out of?" No.
The cane that you picked up is kind of cool. It's like multi-purpose. You said you can also use it for off-road, like hiking and stuff.
Yes, it is the all-terrain cane. It does very well. It's very lightweight going hiking, or if you're skiing. I don't know. I've never been skiing, but I could see where it would come in handy going hiking. I've done a lot of hiking in the past, and one thing that I was always afraid of is leaning on my cane, because a typical folding cane is not meant to be leaned on. But this cane, you can tell it's rugged. It's made for that kind of stuff.
How old were you the first time you ever tried walking with a cane?
5, 6 years old. I didn't want to use it. I was your typical rebellious kid. I didn't like it. And so I was always throwing it at the teacher, like, no, I'm not going to use this. You're not going to get me to use this. One thing that I can take back from being at the school for the deaf and blind, ages like 15 to 20, is that one thing that I learned was orientation and mobility. The teacher gave me some very creative ways to use the cane, so that gave me the confidence to go out and travel.
So how far was that school from your home?
I am in Phoenix. That school is in Tucson, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away.
Do you remember living in Mexico at all?
No. The most vivid memories that I have are of me in kindergarten. And the teachers used to tell me that in kindergarten, I didn't know any English whatsoever.
Wow.
And I don't remember that. I just remember speaking English all my life.
Do you still speak Spanish?
Oh, yes. I'm fluent in both languages. And being fluent in both languages helps me a lot, because I don't know if it's just a Hispanic thing, but people tend to talk a lot. I don't know if it has to do with my culture believing that disabled people should be treated a certain way. I mean, you go to Mexico and you don't see them. You don't see disabled people out very often. Or if you do, you see them doing a lot of the menial jobs, like selling jewelry. And again, I have nothing against that. I just feel that we could do a lot more. I remember being on the bus one time. These two ladies were gossiping, and I know they were talking about me because I heard the word blind and out in the street, and where's his mother? Like, why isn't she with him? The friend that was with me was like, why aren't you saying anything? And I'm like, why do I need to say anything? Let them talk. Let them say whatever they're gonna say. And he kept pushing me, like, say something. They're talking garbage. Like, say something. And so finally, as I'm getting off the bus, I turned to the ladies and I said, "You two have a wonderful rest of your day," in clear Spanish. I didn't wait to see their reactions. I just walked off. I only found out later that when we were like far away from the bus, my friend says, "Oh, that lady's face turned so red. I don't know what you said, but her face turned red."
Good. Deserved.
Yeah.
You're the type of person that likes to prove people wrong. I'm sure you had a ton of people telling you what you can't do during your childhood. What kind of stuff were you doing during your childhood?
One place that, and they're still around too, there's a place here. It's called the Foundation for Blind Children. They were always encouraging us to go out in the community to do things. So through them, we would go camping, we played sports. One of my favorite things was going rock climbing.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. There was another rappelling, I think it was called. And when I say rock climbing, I'm not. I mean, yes, we did go to the rock gym. the Phoenix Rock Gym. I don't know if it's still around, but that's one of the my childhood places. I went there all the time. We actually got to go rock climbing on, well, rocks, these 50-foot high boulders that you had to find footholds and finger holds, and you had somebody under you belaying, and I got to be the belayer a couple times. I was on the wrestling team when I was in high school. It was only for about 2 years, but that was a lot of fun. Other than that, I mostly kept to myself. I read a lot. That's why I'm a pretty good Braille reader now. As a kid, I had stacks and stacks of Braille books, and my parents would get mad at me because it would be 1 or 2 in the morning and they were trying to sleep but couldn't because I would be making noise reading my Braille. I've always had a problem with insomnia, and so now I'm glad that I have my own room because I'm not bothering anybody.
Do you find yourself attracted to fiction or nonfiction primarily?
Fiction,
Mm-hmm.
fiction. Just the fantasy. Right now, I'm reading the Mr. Mercedes trilogy by Stephen King. I guess what I like is the fact that, as scary as it is, it doesn't affect me. So I can watch true crime and not get affected by it. I can listen to horror and not get affected. That doesn't mean that I haven't gotten scared in my life, but I guess because of the experiences that I've been through, just seeing it down on paper, it doesn't affect me. Scary movies are another thing that I love watching, but they don't affect me.
The first adult books that I was ever exposed to were Stephen King books. Right there with you, man.
Yep, when I was younger, the teachers would try to get me to read things like The Yearling and Where the Red Fern Grows. I would turn to them and I would say, but where's the excitement? I mean, they're good books, but where's the excitement? Where's the gore and all of that other stuff?
Okay, speaking of gore, do you remember a series, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
No.
I mean, you got to check these out. Yes, they were written for teenagers who like horror books, but Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark were great. I think for me, it started with Goosebumps,
Oh,
R.L. Stein
Goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
Yes.
I think it went from Goosebumps to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark to Stephen King, and that was within like 2 years I made those steps.
Yeah, and Stephen King was great. I remember I started out with Goosebumps, and after a while I was like, you guys think these are scary? Really? And then the teacher who heard me say that said, oh, you think that Goosebumps isn't scary? Here, let me give you Christine by Stephen
Wow,
King.
interesting first one from King's repertoire.
Yes. And then, of course, after I read the book, I had to watch the movie. I followed that one up with Carrie, and then I think it was The Shining.
Oh, I love The Shining. I mean, both the novel and the Kubrick film. Absolutely love it. I know the Kubrick film strays from the novel dramatically, but I love Kubrick as far as a director. Obviously, one of my favorite directors of all time. I think the first Stephen King book I read, I believe it was The Tommyknockers.
I haven't read that one.
I don't know how old I was, 12 or something, but we had a friend of the family's who was a grown adult, and he was a big Stephen King fan and had like a pretty extensive King library. So he let me borrow one. I believe the one that he selected for me, because I think some of them he thought were just too mature. Maybe Gerald's Game or something, maybe too mature for where I was in my life. So I think he passed on the Tommyknockers. I think that was the first one for me. Okay, so Beto, let's fast forward back to boarding school. You said that you experienced some bullying at the hands of blind people, your blind peers. That's just a fascinating topic because I think outsiders have the impression that folks dealing with the same disability are endlessly supportive of one another. But you're not the first person that I've spoken to that said you've experienced bullying within your community.
True. I was appalled. When I was in school, I thought the same thing because the way that going to the blind school was pitched to me was, oh, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to be around people that are your age, close to your age, and you're going to really enjoy it because there's this and there's that, and they're going to be at your same academic level. I went to the school and no, everybody was a far lower academic level than I was. It was at that school that I really got to see abuse of power not even for the first time, but where it was, how should I say, I was surprised when I went to school. I used to get money from my parents because you needed money for some of the activities. We had our dormitory, we had a store that would sell snacks, sodas, chips, and junk food that teenagers like. Other people from the other dormitories would come over and they would buy stuff. I remember one time I had bought, I think it was two pizzas and maybe three sodas, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't always like the cafeteria food, so I'm gonna buy these pizzas and sodas, and if I don't like the cafeteria food, no problem. I'm just gonna go back to the dorm and I'm just gonna eat it. So I get back there, somebody was already eating them and literally right in front of me. And I knew it was them because I opened the drawer where I had kept everything hidden, and they're like, "What are you going to do about it?"
Jeez.
And I couldn't do anything about it. And the dorm staff tried to go in and say, "Hey, you ate so and so's food. Like, you need to replace it." The food never got replaced. And if I didn't give up my money or my food, I would usually get beat up. And my parents worked a lot, or they worked all the time. And so I would try to talk to them, and they would tell me, well, you need to defend yourself. But then if I defended myself, I was the one that would get in trouble, and the aggressors usually got away with it. Unfortunately, that made me become sort of bitter. I absolutely disliked self entitlement. I think it was my last year of school. I finally got tired of it and I said, you know what, to heck with it. If I get in trouble or if I don't get in trouble, I've had it. I'm not going to put up with it anymore. Which, of course, resulted in me getting kicked out of the school.
Wow.
But then I still had to deal with the bullying because I learned about the other part of the blindness community back in like 2007, 2008, back when they were using Skype and MSN and Yahoo and a lot of these other messaging services that you don't really hear about anymore. I remember being in these conversations and people were just so mean to each other. And I would think, how is this a community? But because I had already been exposed to that physically, I made it a point to root for the underdog. There was a guy, and I tell this story, but not to, again, like I had no ill will toward this person. He had started calling me names, derogatory Mexican names. What he was telling me wasn't affecting me, but it was making somebody else in the Skype call uncomfortable. And I kept telling him, hey, you need to stop or face the consequences. And he wouldn't stop. I told him 3 times, I warned him, I said, if you don't stop, I'm gonna do something about it and you're not gonna like it. And he didn't stop. So I happen to know that there was some music genres and some sounds that he didn't like. I took a clip of that music genre and the sounds that he didn't like, and I put them together because I know a thing or two about audio editing, and I played it through the call, and I've never heard from him since. I have this tendency to just call people out, but with humor. And the way I see it is if they're the ones not laughing, then more than likely it's because whatever I'm saying has had some sort of an impact on them.
That's right.
And it's probably not the best way to deal with the bullying, but that was the only way I knew how.
But what do you think the root of folks bullying others within their own community is?
Jealousy. Jealousy and fear. And it took me till I was much older to figure this out. And I've dealt with jealousy all my life. So even in my managerial position, like I've had guests tell me, you're the property manager, so you should be able to do X, Y, and Z. Even though it looked like they were coming at it from a point of authority or a point of strength, I always saw it as they were afraid of something. My mom, who is the matriarch, I think people like her, not saying her specifically, but people like that are afraid of just losing control of a situation. And who knows, maybe people are just that afraid to let go of power.
When you were 21 years old, you experienced quite a rough year. That's generally a joyous time in a young person's life. You lost
Yeah.
your best friend at 21, and you also were diagnosed with a very mild cerebral palsy. Let's first touch on losing your best friend. What was your friendship like with this individual, and how did he tragically pass away?
So him and I, we had met online. I wasn't in a stable living situation at the time, so he had suggested, "Hey, why don't you come and take care of me?" And I know, kind of looking at it from the outside, that's like, why would you leave home just to go take care of somebody else? And I thought that at first, but then in 2008, I decided, you know what? What he's proposing to me sounds good. So I left Phoenix and I moved to Los Angeles where I lived there for like 6 months. When I was living with this friend, he was a quadriplegic, so I needed to do things like change the catheter, feed him because he couldn't feed himself. It's where I learned a lot of my caregiving skills. We would oftentimes go out in public. There was one time where he told me, "Man, I really want some Costco pizza. Let's go get some." And I told him, "Well, aren't you embarrassed that people aren't gonna look at you funny because I'm feeding you?" And he's like, "You know what? I don't really care." So I said, "Hey, you know what? That's awesome. Let's do it." So we got the pizza, and sure enough, as I'm feeding him, somebody was watching us. And I think I made a joke too. I was like, "Hey, you want to turn?" And he laughed, and the other person just walked off. We had a really good relationship. We were going to bars where the bartenders would tell us that we couldn't drink. I don't know what the deal was, if it was because he was in a wheelchair and he could barely move, and he used a communicator to talk because of his CP. A lot of times he would get ignored. He would try to use the communicator and people would be like, "What is he saying?" And it's like, "Well, look at the screen. He wants a beer. Get him a beer." It's like, "Well, I don't feel comfortable serving him beer." Then I would have to fight with the bartenders, and I got kicked out of more than one bar or grocery store. So it was really hard losing this guy because he taught me a lot of things when it came to caregiving, when it come to advocating for other people. I don't blame myself anymore, but I blamed myself for a long time for his death because the week before my 21st birthday, he had lost a family member and a good friend. And so the day before my birthday, I decided, "Hey, let's get some pizza and we'll just be at the house and we'll hang out." We decided that we were gonna drink some vodka. I tried something that year called Aftershock, and I think I drank like half a bottle, which was a big, big mistake. Him and we drank a lot. And then the day of my birthday, I noticed that he wasn't waking up. It was like 3, 4 in the afternoon and he still wasn't awake. And I'm thinking maybe because of last night's bender, he's still asleep, but he needs to eat. I need to get him up. When I went to wake him up, he had no pulse, he wasn't moving, and he had been dead a while. I blamed myself because I had been the one to give him the last of the alcohol. For years, I was thinking, man, like, what kind of an advocate am I? Like, I should have been there and I should have not done what I did. And it took a lot of therapy to get over that, to where my therapist said, like, "Hey, it's not your fault." Losing him really impacted me because just seeing the way he would advocate for himself and just seeing the way that even though he was very limited, anywhere that his wheelchair would go, he would go. I have so many stories of him and I just getting into trouble, walking along the Santa Monica Pier, eating a lot. I think my 6 months in LA were probably the most fun.
And I'm glad you were able to show him some camaraderie and friendship in those final days of his life, too. That's important also. He had a true friend for those 6 months.
Yeah, he did. And to me, like it felt, I don't know if I would say like an honor, maybe it was. Every time he would ask me to do something, I would be like, "Do you need anything else? Like, are you sure you don't need anything else?" We would literally go to the store and he would tell me, "Hey, can you reach up to the top shelf and get me that specific brand of razors?" And because he could see, he would know how to direct my hand. With me and him, it wasn't what people typically do when they try to show me things where it's like, "It's over there." Where? Right there. You're pointing. I can't see. For him, it was more like, if you reach your hand, no, not that one, that box right there, take it down for me. We worked really, really well together.
What about this diagnosis, also in your 21st year? Oh boy, when it rains, it pours, that you had
Yeah.
been diagnosed with mild cerebral palsy.
On my 21st birthday, or on my 20th year, 21st year, he started noticing that I would eat a lot. Whenever I would pour from heavy jugs or containers, my hand would shake and he would say, "Do you have CP?" And I would be like, "No, I'm just blind." Then he would point out other things. Like he would say, "Yeah, you do have CP because that explains why you eat a lot." And when I say I eat a lot, I eat a lot. My friend would say, "Yeah, the CP has certain symptoms that you have, like you shaking, or when I walk for long periods of time, my feet will start to hurt." And I would tell them, "But that was something else that I was born with. The doctors had to straighten out my feet, so I had to wear a brace till I was 5. So that has nothing to do with CP." And he said, "No, not that. It's just the way you walk." He really made me think about it. Now I accept it. It's not limiting me in any way. I'm still able to do everything that I've always wanted to do. So I'm okay with it.
Through all these trials and tribulations, now a couple years further into your adulthood, you've actually reached a pretty darn impressive level of success as a property manager. How does your disability make you a better property manager?
It makes me more aware. And I say that because I've always believed that a lot of people who can see take their sight for granted. I use all my other senses, and so I've been able to pick up things that a lot of other people aren't able to pick up. So even though I don't see the body language, or I don't see the facial expression, there's other things that kind of tell me like how I should deal with these guests. Me being aware, it does definitely play a big part in my job.
And how did you fall into radio hosting?
That was something that I had been wanting to do. I decided, you know what, I'm gonna just create my own radio station. I built, so as not to get too technical, I basically built the radio station that I have now from scratch.
How do you do that, Beto? Being a blind individual, how do you navigate the template?
It's very hard. Luckily for me, this one was command based. It's very similar to working with something like DOS for Windows, which I never worked with. I always worked with Linux. I have a virtual computer that runs it. I log in through another computer and I type out the commands. The template does the rest of the work.
Super impressive. There's folks that don't have any disability that are incredibly intimidated by something like that. And you're over here coding your own radio station. You really do have a quality about you that wants to overcome what you're not supposed to be able to do. It's a really cool quality.
And a lot of it comes from my childhood. Many Hispanic cultures believe that the disabled person should just stay out of the way and not contribute, or the disabled person should just stay out of the way and only speak when they're spoken to. I was never okay with that.
What would be your advice to an individual who's growing up in that type of community, a community that discourages disability independence? What would be your advice to an individual that has a disability? Let's just say they're blind, okay, because you can relate to that, who's growing up in that kind of community?
To ignore the naysayers. That was basically me. I had to do that a lot. Because even teachers would tell me, "Well, that's too advanced for you." And I would say, "Is it really?" The only people who know what we're capable of is us, we the individual. Nobody else should be able to dictate what you can and can't do.
One thing I really love about you when you were talking about being a property manager, you referred to the folks you're working with as guests. You didn't say tenants. You didn't say renters. You didn't say commoners. You called them guests. I think that simple distinction is so indicative of who you are as a person and how you view the world.
To me, the word tenant has always seemed a little out of place. I've always wondered why people like to use that, like to use their superiority. I don't like doing that. I think we're all humans and we should be treated as such. I would treat them as equals.
Just like you refer to those folks as guests, I'm honored to have you as my guest today.
Thank you. It feels very interesting being referred to as a guest when I've been referring to other people as guests for so many years.
Well, you definitely deserve the same level of respect that you give your guests, and I hope we provided that for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Guys, you can catch Alberto on X/Twitter at FolShow, FOLSHOW, and also on Clubhouse app at FolShow, FOLSHOW. Been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your willingness to open up and tell your story today.
You are very welcome.